Today we're going to make something interesting because I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to make it yet. Most of the times when I start a devlog, I have a decent idea as to what I'm going to make. But today we're actually going to go over to Photoshop real quick, because here I'm going to show you a quick visualization of what we're going to make. Because what we're going to make is going to be a lock-on system. So let's say we have the player here, and we have a bunch of enemies. Let's make those so just some X's, right? We have a bunch of enemies around us. I want a lock-on system which works in two different ways. First off is our soft lock-on system. Right now, when we attack, let's pick a different color for that real quick. When we attack, we just attack straight ahead in the direction we're facing. And that is fine, but I already find that that is a little iffy to control. So what I want to do is I want the player character at all times to be aware of the nearest enemy to it. That's in this case going to be this enemy. And when I attack towards that enemy. It's kind of like aim assist for just melee combat. I think that's going to improve the game feel quite a bit. But then on top of that, I also want a hard lock-on system. And the hard lock-on system will also impact the camera. So let's say we have the camera being over here. This is my drawing of a camera. And we're attacking the nearest enemy. That's going to be relatively jarring. So I want the player to have an option to enable hard lock-on, which will then change the camera position to always have both the player and the currently focused enemy, which you can switch by probably using the shoulder buttons, to be in view. So as such, the camera will have to be placed on a line that goes from the enemy to the player and then gets extended beyond the player to find a good position for the camera to be at. And obviously this will be able to track. So if the player then moves to here and it still has this enemy as its focus, it's going to have to place the camera right here. The rotation of the camera in my drawing is really bad, but this is just a little sketch to show you what the system is that I'm going to make. The first part of that, the soft lock-on system, is probably not going to be that big a deal. I just need to have a list of all of the enemy objects in a certain radius around me, and then just find the one that is closest to me every single frame. My worry comes in with the camera position system, because finding the look at rotation here between the enemy and the player is not going to be a problem. Let's say that this is 30 degrees, right? That's all fine. Like if this angle is 30 degrees, then so should this angle be 30 degrees. Meaning that these two angles are both 150. So that's not too difficult to find that information. My only question is, how am I going to, based on those degrees, find this position? Because it's going to be a constant distance from the player. Let's say this distance is like 10 unity units. So how am I going to get a distance 10 units away in a tilt of 30 degrees? And then also obviously having it look at the player, that's not a problem. We just have a function for that. It's going to take experimenting. So as I am not entirely sure what we're going to do yet with the hard lock-on system, we're going to get started with the soft lock-on system, which also has a thing that I need to figure out, because I need to have an indicator for both the hard and the soft lock-on system actually, where the enemy that is currently being locked onto, so that is in this case this enemy, needs to have a little indicator on top of it. And obviously preferably that indicator changes color when we go into the hard lock-on. With all of that explained, that's what we're going to be doing today, so let's get into it. First and foremost, let's go into the player manager script. I think that's where this makes most sense to be, because we've got player combat. We could put it in there actually. That's probably the only place we're going to need this. Let's open that one as well real quick and just check. Yeah, let's put it in player combat instead. I think that makes more sense, because that's where this pulse, which is a bad name for the function, But that is the dash towards the enemy, and that's located in this class. So let's put void attack and all of this minimized, and make a new function for this. So that's going to be void find enemies. I have no plans for what I'm going to do here, so I'm kind of just like making it up as I go. And then find enemies is going to be in void update. Can close that down again. And I think we can do a physics. And then what is the thing called again what we're using here? Check sphere. And for that we're going to need a vector 3 position, which will just be our transform position. A radius, which that's a good question. What are we gonna do with the radius for this? I'm going to, for the moment, just make that a variable so that we can play around with that a little bit easier. So let's make that a serialized field enemy find radius. And of course we need to set that to a float as well because I'm an idiot. Let's just set that to 10 by default. Enemy find radius. And then we need a layer mask, which is actually very useful because that way we can immediately just check for only the enemies. So let's add a layer here. And I don't really care which layer it is. We can use layer 9 and call this enemies, which also means that in our spawner, this is very important, that when we spawn our monster, we do need to put it on that layer. So monster game object dot layer equals what's the best way to do this, because I don't know the numbering for it. I'm gonna be honest with you. Is that just layer 9? I think so, yeah. So let's just put that to 9. Back in player combat, we're only checking layer mask 9. We're looking for an integer here. And that should be it. But that gets us a bool. I need a object reference. From that is the issue. Alright, I made a bit of a mistake. We need to use physics overlap sphere, because this will return a collider, which can reference back to the game objects. So for that we'll make a, let's see, collider enemy check equals that. In theory that should work, right? That's a collider array, that makes sense. And then we simply do a for loop where, that makes sense to me, yeah. We cycle through the length of the enemy check. And we'll add a new, let's do a new list of type enemy and call it enemy list. That makes sense to me. So that we can put that array into that list. So first and foremost, every frame we need to clear the enemy list. Otherwise we're going to be overriding stuff and it's gonna, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm thinking, is that like extra computing power that we're wasting there? It's probably not that expensive to just clear the list and repopulate it if nothing else happens. But this is the most direct way to make sure that everything that's outside the range will be cleared out. Everything that's still in the range will be put back in. I do wonder if it puts it in a random order or if this already is ordered in distance as well. Interesting thing to think about. We'll think about that in a moment. Because we're going to go enemy list add enemy check number I game object. It's a good point. I didn't make a list of game objects, did I? No, I did not. But we can just change that to game object, right? We're going to need to have the location of it anyway. And there's not really any reason for this to be an enemy type anyway. So let's make this game object. And then after the for loop, let's make a list of type float. Call it distance. And then we'll do another for loop. In theory, the enemy list and enemy check should have the same length, but we're going to use the enemy list here just to be sure. and that uses count instead of length, because why the fuck wouldn't it? And there we go, distance, add transform. It's in a transform, right? The function that can find the distance to another position. Oh, the rotate around might actually end up being useful for the hard lock on system. Hold on, that's not a transform, that is a vector3 dot distance. There we go, and then we put in two vector3s, so that's going to be transform position and enemy lists number I dot transform. Why is it not autofilling? That means something's going wrong. Do I need to use square brackets? I need to use square brackets, don't I? I do. This is being problematic now, and that is using unassigned local variable distance. That's not true. Oh, hold on. Is new list floats. There we go. Yeah. This still throws me for a loop sometimes, why that's entirely necessary, but... And I'm missing a thing here, so that one matches with that. Okay. Now we've got a list with all the distances, and hopefully we can just now say distance. Can we like just sort this? Is there any good way to sort through this? There should be, right? Sort. I mean, I don't know what sort does, so maybe we should Google that before I just start assuming things. Okay, so as far as I'm reading here, this does indeed just work. And then in our combat we can now set a game object for closest enemy. And after we sort this thing, closest enemy can be set equal to... Hold on, we only sorted the distances, not the actual... That's a good point. We didn't actually sort our enemy list. We only sorted our list of distances. So let's say that we sort our enemy list instead. How do we use our distances for that? So, different ID. What if we could just find the lowest value in distance? So, do we have a min value somewhere in here? I think we did, right? A math function for min, distance, and we can make an array out of that actually, because it expects an array. But we have a function for that apparently. Sweet. And if we can do that, we can put this entire thing into our enemy list as the index. No, we can't, because this does return the index of the thing. Almost had a good idea there. Almost had a good idea. Fuck. But we have a possible solution here, because I'm at this point just literally Googling. But if we go enemy lists, we can just use index off, and then we put in that. Obviously, we don't get what we want there, because we need to use the distance list there. But now this gives us the index of what we need, so we can copy this line of code over, and with that we can get out of our enemy list what we need. So now we have a function that finds the closest enemy and makes us focus on that. In order to test this, we're going to need to be able to visualize that though, which is going to be a whole separate thing. For ease of accessing this, we're just going to make this public real quick, because this is going to need to be used by a different script, and we could just make a function for that. You know what, let's just do that. It's literally like one line of code, so we might as well. That way we can only read that variable and not write to it, which is mostly to protect myself from doing something stupid. Okay, now going to our canvas, we're actually going to go back to 2D real quick, because we're going to add a UI element, and I don't know, let's just add an image for now. This works fine enough. I don't have a placeholder sprite for this, but it's just for testing purposes, right? What are we going to call this script? Called enemy tracker. It's probably a very bad and non-descriptive name for that, but you know what, I don't care. We want a serialized field for our player combat, which we'll just call player, and we want to have a... Can we just have an image as a variable or something like that? And it seems like I was right, because I forgot to add using, I think it's Unity Engine UI. There we go. Because now that we are using that, I should be able to add in an image. And we'll call that tracker. Of course, I misspell it immediately. But now that I don't have misspelled it, we can just get component image there and avoid updates. In theory, we should be able to say, I think we can get it through rectangle transform and then position. And then we need a function which I had on my screen a moment ago. So let me go find that again. Yeah, we need a reference to a camera as well. So we can go serialized field, camera, let's just call it cam. And that should allow us to just say cam world to screen points. And for that, we can then use our player.get closest enemy.transform.position. That should be all there is to this, I hope. So let's put in our player combats and let's put in our camera objects and see if it works. We only have one enemy at the moment in our normal scene, but yeah, no, this definitely is going to need some work because it's not doing that yet. Now is the question, where lies the issue? The issue lies in the fact that... Very, very good question indeed. Really? From that line? That doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me. I did add this to the update function, right? I am not that much of an idiot. Yes, I did. Okay. Would you believe that the issue that we had before is the issue that we're having here as well? We just need to declare it as a new list. Still don't understand why that is a thing, but it is a thing. So now it should work. Okay. It's following my character. Why is it following my character? What? Why is the closest enemy classified as myself? Can I just say layer mask name to layer? What did we call it again? I think we called it enemies with a capital E. Let's test this one out first before we start messing around with the other code as well. At this point, this cannot... Okay, at least it's getting added to the proper layer mask. I still don't know what the fuck this on collision enter thing is about, but I don't think it's actually providing issues. Hold on, we're not getting any... It's following the player again. Why is it following the player? If enemy list dot count is greater than 0, then we do this. Else we set closest enemy to being null. And then in the enemy tracker we check if our player closest enemy is not equal to null. Then we do this. And else, what do we do if we have else? I suppose we set the tracker enabled equal false. So then we also want to enable you to be set to true. It keeps going for the... Why does it keep going for the player? Add a serialized field here for the tracker position, which is going to be a transform. Because that way when we go into the prefab for the enemy, as we have here, we can add a new empty game object. And we can put this in any position we like now. So something along these lines. So it's in the middle of the body. And then in here, we have our tracker position, which will be that. And instead of setting this programmatically, we just have to set this to the enemies layer, which should finally do what we want it to do. It doesn't re-enable though. So that was probably the issue we had before as well. And that is likely to do with the fact that we're just disabling the thing and we can't re-enable it, I guess. Oh, that's because we're not setting the tracker to be enabled again. We're setting the entire script to enable. Okay, so we have that. As soon as we go outside of range, it disappears. When we get back into the range, okay, our tracking works. It's fairly short range because it's still set to 10 at the moment, I think. Yeah. So let's set to like 25. And now we can get a lot further away. A little closer. What the actual fuck? Why? But hey, if nothing else, we proved the fact that it does change to the nearest object, even if we didn't want it to be that specific object. Don't understand anything about this, but Google says this should work. So, and then when I put this to enemies, Google says it'll work. So it probably won't. Oh, actually, yeah, that does work. And it does stick to specifically. That is upsetting. You would assume that just layer mask to layer name does the trick, but you need to put this little thing before it. And then it works. I hate my life. I really do. We have a working tracking system now, right? We have a list of nearby enemies, and we get the closest enemy. I'm just killing this enemy real quick to see what happens when we have two enemies. That's the closest now. Now that's the closest. Now that's the closest. Okay, that took me an hour and a half. I expected that to take me 20 minutes. Anyway, our pulse is right now, it's just transform up and plus transform forward. That will turn into a transform look at closest enemy, transform position, which turns it into a float value. In that case, can we just do transform position minus closest enemy, transform position, and put those into brackets just in case that makes a difference. We'll also probably need to manually rotate. That's probably a better way to do it. Okay, right now we are doing this the wrong way around, but this works if we swap this around. So we subtract the other way around. This will send us towards that enemy, but it doesn't rotate us towards there. The thing is, if we need to rotate towards it, we might as well just use the forward. Okay, that actually works remarkably well. But we also move faster if we're further away, which actually is kind of a neat thing. Yeah, I actually think I like that. Because that means as long as we're in range of an enemy, we're always going to get to that enemy rather than just moving weakly into its direction. So let's keep that and then just set the transform the rotation to being transform look at close enemy transform position. Oh, we don't need to use transform position or rotation like that. We can just say transform look at, and that should then also turn us around. You see, this is the easy bit. Now that we figure all the other shit out, this is the easy bit. Next time the camera system is going to be difficult again, but yeah, okay, no, that actually works like a charm. We, for some reason, aren't hitting... I just want to test the theory. Did we actually need this thing to have a collider? Did we? Because I feel like we might not have needed that. No, we actually did. Okay, that's interesting. That is very interesting, because if we now go into our enemy clone here, and we go to the game object and enable its collider. Okay, what if it's a trigger? That still works. I feel like the collider within here was interfering with our attacks, which is the reason we're doing that. But if we can just set it to being a trigger, that should fix that issue. We're not landing attacks as well, and the reason we're not landing attacks is because we're also rotating in the... Which axis is that actually? In the X. We can just fix that with transform location equals new vector 3, 0, transform rotation Y, transform rotation Z. No, we can't, because we need that to be quaternion dot this, right? What do we need for this? Float X, Y, and Z. We can just use this function instead. Probably doesn't matter that much. Okay, so now we shouldn't rotate around the x-axis anymore, which makes hitting things a lot easier, in theory. So if we're far away, okay, that makes hitting things a hell of a lot easier. And immediately more satisfying as well, I might add. We probably should get that whole pulse thing to only happen if we're within a certain distance of the enemy. Ooh, that is actually... Oh, I like that. That's a lot more satisfying than you'd actually think. And it works well because you get stopped due to the collision anyway, right? Unless you manage to actually hit them in the perfect moment and you like go through. There is some room for abusing if you like frame perfect there, or near frame perfect. But let's see if that is, number one, actually the case, and number two, if people figure that out to begin with. Okay, our targeting system is done. Next time, the lock-on system.